Okay. Let me just check. All right, it's recording. Okay. Wolf. Okay. You asked me for advice regarding starting clinical rotations, and I thought about it, and it's happening in the form of a video. I thought of like writing you like these bullets and everything, and I thought about sending you audio messages, and I'm like, yeah, I don't even know how long that would take, one. And then I just felt like I like talking, right? I like sharing stories, and I think this is gonna be, I think, the best option for right now. Okay, so I have a list of a lot of different pieces of advice, and take what you want, take what you need, take what resonates with you. I will say that being in rotations is going to be like a whole nother journey, and that you're prepared, okay? And that it's gonna be different, but it's still the same. So it's different, but the same, okay? So a lot of these pieces of advice might be similar, but they also might be different. So we'll see. And I will say this, just take everything I say with a grain of salt and just figure out what works best for you. Okay, so the first piece of advice is, so I know we talked a lot about balance, right? We talked about how you want to have balance, your school and exercise, and sleep is important, having a social life, right? And this is going to sound paradoxical, but just know that it's okay to be out of balance for clinical year. Like, there are going to be some rotations where you're just like, what is happening? Like, literally, what is happening? And just know that it's kind of okay, like, to be out of balance during this time. It's almost like it's okay to be just doing whatever the rotation needs, and that's just part of the overall balance, because this time of your life right now is very intense and very rigorous, and it's just its own thing of like immense stress. And just give yourself some grace that it's okay to be out of balance. Okay, the second thing is that it doesn't last forever, right? So let's say you have a really stressful rotation, and let's say this specific one is a lot more stressful, and just know, like, hey, there's a start and an end to it. So that was helpful for me when I was going through a lot of that stuff, like, hey, like, this isn't like permanent, right? So it's just like storms don't last forever. This rotation isn't going to be forever too. And to like remind you that there's an end to things. Okay, stretching and reading before bed. So I encourage you to have some sort of nighttime routine before you go to bed. And I talk about stretching because as we get older, our body does not work as well. And I remember how intense, right, the rotation is. And just like, you go from being in didactic year, being you're studying, you're going to lecture, it's a little bit more comfortable in a way, but then now you're going to be thrown into different locations, a lot of different interactions with different people. And so all that to say, it is important to have a routine that helps ground you. And so I lean towards before sleep, because sleep is just so crucial for like remembering things, just all the functions of life, right? And so having one before you go to bed is good. And so I encourage you to stretch and read, and it could be like reading your notes or something that you really want to solidify, because the stuff that you do before and after you go to bed or sleep is like, just, you really lock it into your memory. Okay, so in the same vein of like health and grounding, apply your successful gym routine to your sleep routine. So, you know, like there's going to be some weeks that you get to work out like how much you want, and you found like a good system of doing it a couple times a week. Apply that to your sleep as well. That's probably one of the things that I struggled with the most during my rotations and just like throughout PA school, right? Like we want to burn the candle at the midnight oil and get as much in, right? But just rest is so important so that you can remember, so that you can perform optimally in your rotations, so that you can communicate well and just be present during the rotation. Okay, this might have been more applicable during didactic year, but I just wanted to point it out. So group projects were a struggle. I think coordinating, you know, the like dividing tasks, right? Dividing equal and making sure everyone was like pulling their weight. But communication was probably the biggest thing. Like setting up a time and coordinating for everyone to meet together was probably the hardest. But I learned an important lesson during that time, as sort of like I tried different things. And the thing that worked best, if there's a big group of people that you need to coordinate with, even in your rotations, is to text them or message them individually. So group texts, they kind of work, right? But actually I think they just fail, because when one person responds, they're like, oh, okay, like someone's responded to the group text, right? And it's like there's less onus on each individual person in the group text to reply. So I encourage you, if there's a lack of communication and you guys need to coordinate something, text them individually, and don't be afraid to follow up. Like, life gets busy, and don't think, oh, I'm waiting to hear back from this person, and like I texted them 3 days ago, like what's going on? Or even if the time frame commits, like you're waiting to hear back the same day, like don't be afraid to be like, hey, just checking in, like did you get my text? Or like just like a very neutral, like looking forward to hear back from you, or like what are your thoughts, you know, just sort of like I would say that's helpful, because even me, when I get those messages, I appreciate them. I'm like, yes, thank you for reminding me to text you, because I did mean to do that. You know what I mean? So just know that can apply in your clinical year. All right. So exams. It's okay to fail an exam. I'm trying to think back. Was I even taking exams at that time? I think so. I think after each rotation, I would take an exam. But you can correct me if you're like, hey, I don't have any exams anymore. Great. But let's say I'm like going to assume that you're still taking exams in clinical year. Just know that it's okay to fail. It really is okay to fail. And just know, okay, you failed. All right. So the important thing is to understand why, like what happened there. You know, was it just like a series, like did the concepts just not solidify? Was there just a lack of studying, lack of time? Like what kind of understanding, like where were the gaps? And really apply your problem solving for yourself, and be like, okay, like what can I do for the next exam? Or like really learning from what happened rather than dwelling on, oh, I failed. You know what I mean? Yeah, I would say I know that I had a specific situation where I definitely failed an exam, and I remember I just had not studied well. I had wasted, you know, time, which is a subjective thing. Like, well, are you really wasting it, right? But just I know that my time could have been better spent in terms of like preparing for that exam, but it didn't happen, you know? And there was a lot of like troubleshooting, like, oh, like, you know, what happened? Like there was some like stress that needed to be coped, right? And then there's that kind of like that sweet spot of like, okay, like I've coped with the stress, but then sometimes I know in that specific situation, I didn't use my time wisely, right? And so that we learn from those our mistakes. Okay, that brings me to my next point. So finding a healthy outlet or coping mechanism. And I would say exercise is probably the biggest one that I'd recommend, which I know that you're a big fan of.